Welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia. My name is Jason Freeman. I work here in the Author Events office, and I am really excited to be here tonight to introduce Robbie Robertson. All right. With his partners, Rick Danko, Levon Helm, Garth Hudson, and Richard Manuel in the seminal rock group The Band, Robbie Robertson helped change the face of popular music throughout the 60s and 70s. A collaborator on such classic songs. You know what? You guys know him all better than me, I bet. And I know him pretty well. He continues to have an enduring influence through his singular songwriting and torrid, tender, and toned guitar sound. In testimony, Robbie reflects on his half-Jewish, half-Mohawk childhood on an Indian reservation, the band's rough and tumble early days on the road with the Hawk, and his rise to rock and roll royalty and his life after leaving the group. Along the way, he and the band worked with the biggest names in entertainment, including, again, you guys know it, all right. On the eve, you probably know this too, on the eve of the 40th anniversary of his group's swan song, the legendary The Last Waltz concert, tonight you'll learn more about his lyrical life. Tonight, Robbie will be in conversation with Tom Moon, contributor to NPR's All Things Considered and author of the New York Times bestseller, 1,000 Recordings to Hear Before You Die. So let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Robbie Robertson and Tom Moon to the Free Library.
What a great setup you guys have. It's good. It's good.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. What a treat. So we have a lot of music and a lot of history to cover. And I will not always go in chronological order. I'll just say that now. Those of you who have read the book, you know it's mostly chronological. And I want to start in the South. You're just starting to play with Ronnie Hawkins. And in this scene, Levon Helm is driving you to meet his family in Marvell, Arkansas. You're listening to the radio and hearing the bluesman Sonny Boy Williamson's show. And you write, "It just sounded so good, all of it. To my ears, this was poetry coming to life. The names of the towns and rivers, the names of all these characters. Everything had its own rhythm down here. Images and sounds started to get stuck in my head. I was 16 years old and very impressionable." And I want to get a sense about the mythology of the South. Did you have, when you arrived there, a sense of what it was going to be like? Did you have a picture in your mind? Did you have anything other than what you knew on record about the South?
No, and coming from Canada, it was it was such a contrast. It was so extreme. It was pure mythology to me. Pardon me. I've been doing a lot of talking these days. It was, to me, I was going to the holy land of rock and roll. This is where all the music that I loved, it just seemed to be in the air. It was just all around you. And so, and the fact that I was 16 years old, it washed over me. All of these things that you mentioned there. And then I went to the Home of the Blues record store in Memphis. This was like the cathedral. It was like, this was, you could get music there that you would never hear, up north. And so I needed to get this all over me. I needed to swim in this. And for everything that I was taking in at the very beginning of this journey, I thought to myself, just as I suspected. This is so beautiful. This is so real. This is so authentic. I've got to make it so they don't send me back home.
But you were an outsider. Did you? At what point did you not feel like an outsider there anymore? And maybe being an outsider actually helped you absorb more. I mean, one of the things that struck me in the band was how the lyrics were not Faulkner-length sentences. They were the way people actually talked. and they had a real poignance to them that was kind of everyday speech. And you would only get that if your ears were tuned to hearing it almost. And coming from someplace else, you'd maybe feel, oh my God, I've got to capture the way these people talk to each other when they're sitting around after dinner.
I was so impressed and impressionable in this that the word that I used a minute ago really meant something to me. To get inside this world, to get inside this club of music, authentic. I had to touch the authenticity of it. And I had to get them to agree to let me in the club. Now, a Canadian in a rockabilly band in the South, they could have said, you need to wait in the car,
And underage.
Oh, yeah. No, and way, because you had to be 21 to play all the places they were playing. So Ronnie Hawkins was just checking it out. He thought, as he said in there, I might have potential, right? And so he was seeing whether it was worth the risk of having a 16-year-old kid in the group that could get him in trouble in the places that we were playing. It could get him busted, and he could lose, not only the gig, but he could get in deeper trouble. So, and it wasn't just in the South, it was like everywhere we would play. Yeah. So he was really trying to weigh this up, and whether it looked like I could bring enough to the table that it was worth him going to this trouble. So I was on a mission. I had to convince these people. I had to convince Ronnie Hawkins. I had to convince Levon that I could be the real thing, that I was worth this risk.
What conveys that? Just in a general sense, not talking now biographically, but what do you think communicates authenticity in music?
Well, it's always going to be a combination of things. But, in talking about Levon, he was from the Mississippi Delta where he grew up. And in this area, I don't know what it is. I don't know what kind of a phenomenon this was. But in about 100-mile radius around there, from Clarksdale, Mississippi, over to near Helena, where he was from, to Memphis, there was so many incredible musicians came out of there, from blues and R&B and rock and roll and rockabilly and everything, mountain music, all of this, and it fascinated me how there could be this patch there. What's in the water? I thought.
Yeah, you're right.
And
you're right.
I
At
thought,
one point, there's a magic potion in the water.
Pour me a glass, please. So, in meeting Levon, I don't think that I had ever known anybody who had that much music, that much authenticity running through his veins. And so I wanted to soak this up, and he took me under his wing. And he was not only a great drummer, a great singer, but he also played guitar too. So he would show me some little things, and it was like, ooh, that's real. That is something that you hear sitting by the side of the Mississippi River. So from Canada, it struck me in that kind of innocent way. And I thought, I am going to dive in so deep on this that I'm going to make it work. I've got to make it work. So it was life and death for me.
Wow. The time before the band, when you're really concentrating on playing more than writing, correct? And you're working to become a guitar player. Do you remember a point where there's a couple of instances of shows you describe in the book, but can you remember one and maybe share it with us of a moment where you said, okay, now I'm on the right path. This is the way to play in this situation? Was there a night where the light bulb went?
You know, I was going to this school of music there. That my school was the home of the blues, a record store, and everything that I got there, I listened to it and I listened to it until I thought I was becoming part of it. And then that influence and being there, I could feel it starting to come out in my hands. And I knew that if I was going to overcome this limitation of being this young and being from Canada and all of this kind of stuff, I had to show something. And there was a point in there when all of the guys, we would finish playing and everybody would go and hang out and be having a good time. And I would be in my room practicing and playing until my fingers were bleeding. And I still felt like that's not enough. Wow. That's not enough.
Wow. You talk, there are many characters that come up in the, that you encountered in this period and shortly after. Bo Diddley, Howlin' Wolf, Roy Buchanan, Muddy Waters, Otis Redding, Junior Parker, Curtis Mayfield, Velvet Underground, John Coltrane, Charles Lloyd, Charles Mingus. And I you know, to those of us who came later, you look at a list like that and you go, wow, these are all titans. And I can't imagine to have been in the room to experience what it was like with any one of them. How much was it night to night, and how much was it an aggregate thing of just sort of soaking up, the act of soaking up inspiration and sort of being exposed to all of these artists from very different worlds?
Yeah, it was just, you know, an ongoing climb. And you think, I'm going somewhere, I don't know where this path leads, but I do know that I have to drink all of this in, and whether it could be that kind of an extreme between Howlin' Wolf, John Coltrane, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, whatever that was, it was, you're just trying to soak it in. You're trying to, feel that from the inside and saying, our job here is to tap into this, to see what makes this magic happen. So being really young, all you want to do is just, have it wash over you. And as much as you could take in all the places that we played, and there'd be like, in this town, we'd hear some great gospel music. Over in this town, we would hear somebody, who could play a harmonica through his nose, and blow your mind, And all of these pieces, all of these things, this guy, hear him playing a fiddle that he made himself, but it only had 2 strings on it. But he was incredible. And it was much the sound of his foot stomping in his voice as it was the way he played this fiddle. So all of these pieces of music by the side of the road, you just had to absorb and take it all in. And thinking all the while that you're mixing your own personal gumbo. And you're just adding a little ingredient here, a little ingredient there, and it's getting thicker and tastier. And you think, I'm growing in this thing. I no longer just feel like the kid, outside listening to the music through the window.
Wow. Yeah, in fact, you write, my job in life at age 22, this is a little later, was to learn, to absorb the magic, and to have a good time along the way. And I was struck many times in the book by the social nature of this inspiration transfer. Like, you would actually encounter Bo Diddley, you might hear him play, but then you would meet up with him after. You would have interaction with these people in a way that was casual and felt normal to you as a young person. I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that and how different that is now.
Well, you didn't want to get busted, so you had to act as if you belonged there. You know what I mean? You couldn't be like gooning around or bothering these people. So one of the stories in the book is we were playing in a club, Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, next door to Bo Diddley. And Bo Diddley had been a big hero of mine early on. I'd never heard this kind of jungle beat, incredible feel. And when I saw him play live when I was a young kid on one of these like Alan Freed shows, and I thought, what is that? How do you do that? The way he looks, he has these big, horn-rimmed glasses, and he's got this thing on and this square. It's like, whoa, this is amazing.
The maracas as the rhythm section.
Jerome, his maraca player was Jerome. And it was just maracas, a drummer, and this rhythm that he played, and the songs that he wrote, the sound, all of this stuff. So anyway, we're playing in this club, and between sets, I would go over and catch a few minutes of him when I could. When Ronnie Hawkins says, we're going to have some people over to the hotel tonight. Some friends are going to come by. Do you want to go and ask Bo if he would like to join us? I'm like, all right. I'm going to go and invite Bo Diddley to come to the party, right? So I sauntered next door. I go up. I say, hey, Bo, I'm playing with Ronnie Hawkins next door. He says, I love Ronnie Hawkins. He's a funny cat, man. He's a funny cat. So I said, well, we're having some people over tonight. Do you want to come by? And so he says, yeah, what room are you in? So I tell him, come to my room, and then we'll see where we're all going to gather, whose room we're going to gather in. Then I go back to the club, and I've met a really sweet, beautiful young lady there. And I tell her, we're having a little get-together after and everything. Do you want to come by, and just say hello to everybody and everything? And she says, okay, that sounds nice. So we go back to the hotel. Her and I walk back there, and we go to my room, and I'm very, discreetly, changing and everything and being very respectful and everything. And we're sitting there, and there's a knock on the door, and I open it, and Bo Diddley is standing there, and he has his guitar case in his hand, too. And I think, look at that. Bo Diddley is knocking on my door, and he's got a guitar case in his hand. Come on in. So he comes in the room, he sits down, there's his guitar case there. He's looking at the young lady, he's looking at me, and I say, Ronnie will be here in a few minutes. We'll figure out where we're all going to go and everything. And he's kind of sizing up the situation. He reaches down, unlatches it, takes his guitar out of the case. Electric guitar, it's not plugged in. He doesn't even need it plugged in. And he goes, boom, 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 boom. This is his I'm a Man rhythm. Boom, 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 boom. And he's stomping on the floor. And he starts to improvise and make up a song about what he's going to do to the young lady after he gets rid of me. Right? So we're sitting there, we're listening to this, and we're like, wait a minute, wait. And the girl is going, oh my God, look at that time. Finally, Ronnie Hawkins walks in and says, you got Bo Diddley playing in your room, and you don't even have to pay him? Bo Diddley says to me, I'll collect later.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we don't hear about that kind of stuff happening that much anymore. First of all, because there aren't as many characters like Bo Diddley out on the road. But
probably so. Yeah.
So I wonder if last week, this Dylan Live box set monster of all the shows from the tour you did in 1966 came out. This is the Dylan Goes Electric tour, where you say, quote, "I learned to play guitar without looking at my fingers because I was so busy dodging flying objects." And that was, a tour that became very controversial as it went along. I'm wondering if you've heard any of those shows, other than the ones that were out commercially years and years ago, and if you had any reaction to any of that music, hearing that again.
I haven't revisited that, but I remember it quite well. And yeah, years ago, it was like bootleg records, that came out. Like, we'd never heard of like bootleg records. And so people, they had got their hands on, sometimes they were just tapes of people recording it in the audience. But anyway, it was such a particular thing to play all over North America, throughout Australia, all over Europe, and every night, everywhere we played, people booed us and threw stuff at us. And so you can't help but at some point think, are we doing something wrong? Is there, and we understood, we got the joke. We knew that people didn't want their folk hero to be going electric, And so anyway, we're doing this tour, and night after night, it gets to you. You think you're thick-skinned, but it gets to you, and it's kind of, it's hurtful. And the fact that Bob could go out there every night and do this, I thought, damn, if he can get in the trenches, I'll get in the trenches with him. And there was a point in this tour, and one night with these recordings you're talking about, the sound man, the sound mixer, would record some of the concerts. And after the show, we would listen, try to learn, do some things better. We would say, oh, this song here, it's a little bit fast. Let's relax that a little bit here. We could, the intro doesn't quite need to go on that long. We're tightening up things, trying to make it better. Not that the audience would have cared in the least, about these details. So anyway, we're listening to these shows, and there was one in specific that, I remember along the way. And after we listened to the tape, I said to the other guys in the band, and I said to Bob, they're wrong.
Yeah.
They're wrong. This is really good, and I don't care. They're wrong. And there was something happened with us, a boldness, a feeling of like, all right, in your face. Yeah. We're going to play louder and faster, and you're going to have to deal with it,
Yeah. What surprised me, and I listened to a bunch of it, was the instrumental playing that was going on behind, because sometimes Bob's singing and it's kind of a maelstrom, there, and you can hear crowd reaction sometimes and whatnot. But the playing is great, and there's some wonderful guitar playing, that I think I was just curious if you'd ever, if you get the chance to revisit it, you might be surprised. It's really, it's right on the edge.
You mean I was better than I thought, or like what?
I don't know.
No, I do remember. I have that kind of recall, and I do. I remember a lot of that. And regardless of all of this, at some point when you think, this is not normal. This is not the usual. We are in the midst of a musical revolution here, and we're going to have to deal with this. People do not, they don't want it. They're rejecting it. They're telling us to stop and go away, and they're wrong. And it was like, to win that war eventually. It was a battle, but eventually to come out of that on the other end, and now people saying, oh, that was amazing, it was great and everything. But in the time, it's almost something to be proud of, that everybody, was saying, don't do this. And you're saying, I have to do this. And that ultimately the world came around. We didn't change anything. So anyway,
Amen that.
We got through it.
That's right. So probably a lot of people here know about the house near Woodstock called Big Pink and what happened there. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because your account, I've read, we probably all read bunches of stuff, but your account here is the first one that made me really appreciate the collaborative energy just sort of in the house on a daily basis, and how much back and forth there was in terms of the way songs were being written, and people would contribute parts of songs and switch up instruments to sort of illustrate things. I'm wondering, when you thought back about this, if you had if you reflected at all on, like, what can we learn about creativity from what you guys did in that house?
Well, it might be, and I think that it's proved to be something that a lot of music people have gone on to years later and incorporated that kind of a clubhouse workshop environment. So I had this dream, because we had been on the road and and it was we never stopped. It was just ongoing. And I thought, at some point, if we could find this place, a sanctuary where we could go, and I could really think about songwriting, I could really think about incorporating all this mythology and all these characters and that I've been carrying around with me. I can't do it on the run. I've got to find a place. And if we had our own setup, and just to be able to create, just to be able to take things out of the air that didn't exist before and make them come to life. If we had that, boy, that would be something. And then we found this place outside of Woodstock, New York, in West Saugerties, this ugly pink house in the middle of 100 acres where we couldn't bother anybody, nobody could bother us, and we settled in there and we did exactly that.
Yeah. So it was more the environment almost, there being a place for that to happen. And do you think people got it right away, the rest of the guys? Did they share your vision?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Everybody could feel it, but I sold it really well too. Yeah.
Oh, man. So this is the period where you really are becoming a songwriter in a major sense. And later in the book, you talk about you learned about songwriting from reading screenplays. And I thought that was very intriguing. I wonder if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I became a movie bug at a very young age. I became fascinated by the process of it, and that these directors, that it was a vision. And this just wasn't entertainment. There was people, they were doing something. How in the world did they think of that? And after looking at the great American directors and everything, and at quite an early age, and then being introduced to foreign directors, and I was fascinated by, the movies of Ingmar Bergman and Kurosawa and Buñuel and Fellini and Rossellini and on and on and on and on. It was like, how do they come to this conclusion? How do they get there? What's the blueprint for it? And then I found this place in New York called, on 47th Street, called the Gotham Book Mart. Gregory Corso, the poet, turned me on to this place. And And in there you could buy, they published the scripts from a lot of these classic movies. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Maybe this will, tell me something that I'm. So I got one, and I became addicted to them. And I was just reading these. That was my literature. And I could see the blueprint. When you're reading the script for 8.5, you think, how does somebody, are they making it up? Do they know what they're going to do? How does all of these pieces, these incredible images come together and all of that? And I started to learn and learn. And at the same time, we're at this point at Big Pink, and I'm starting to do a lot of writing. And these scripts start to infiltrate my songwriting. And all of a sudden, a song that I'm working on reminds me of a Louis Buñuel movie. And I think, I like that connection. And then I'm writing something else, and I see a little hint of Howard Hawks or John Ford in there. And all of these things, the way that they weave together, it was just what I liked. It wasn't that I thought, this is a smart thing to do, or nobody's done this, or nothing like that. I couldn't help it. It just influenced me in that kind of way. And you know what I mean? You're just drawn to whatever you like.
Yeah. But it gave these songs an enormous visual vividness, a component of like a setting in a place. I don't know whether it was that or something, but the writing you were doing was so rich with a sense of place and the motivation of the people and the sort of feeling that people who you follow in a movie sort of carry with them, and maybe they don't express their motivation or they're thinking right away and you have to follow it for an hour. That I found that to be, I was like, oh yeah, of course. He read screenplays and he was thinking cinematically because the songs are cinematic. I'm not asking a question.
No, but people, and from the beginning, from music from Big Pink and on after that, people would say to me, "Oh my God, these songs you're writing, they're so cinematic," and I was like, "Oh really? Huh? How about that?" As I've got my stash of scripts in my back pocket, yeah.
So we should probably talk a little bit about the Last Waltz. I'm wondering what your favorite. There's so many people who handle the guitar well, who figure in this event. I'm wondering what your favorite guitar moment is.
Favorite guitar moment in this? Well, the obvious one is the thing with Eric Clapton, where his strap breaks and falls down, and I have to jump in and have his back on that. I mean, that was just kind of perfect timing, and it was just a lovely thing, for us to be able to do. It was like our guitars were talking back and forth in that, So I guess that's the obvious one, but there's so many other things, so many discrete things. I liked the way I played on "It Makes No Difference" with Rick Danko singing. Yeah. In that moment, it was just trembling for me, and and Rick's voice, and just the feeling in the room and everything. My feet were barely touching the floor.
So we have some questions from you guys.
Oh no.
It's been almost 40 years since The Last Waltz was released. Looking at it now, what does it make you think?
Well, one thing that it makes you think, last week I was doing an interview with a very renowned music journalist that I've respected for years. And in the conversation, It was something that I'd never thought of like this before. And he said, 40 years since the Last Waltz. He said, in 40 years, is it not a phenomenon that nobody has come along and said, look what they did. That was really quite lovely. That was well done. Let's do it better. Let's raise the bar on this thing. And I thought, well, that's, what we all do. We listen to, or we watch something else and we think, all right, come on, let's go. Let's raise the bar. And he said, there's been terrific things done over the years, beautiful things done, but there's been no Last Waltz in 40 years. So I had never thought of it
That's
like
right.
that. But,
yeah.
All right.
That's awesome. Well, let's stay there. What do you admire most about Martin Scorsese's filmmaking, and what do you like most about him as a friend? There's an urgency with Marty in what we're doing. And we've been working together. After the Last Waltz, he asked me to work on the music for Raging Bull. And I've worked on, I guess, most of his movies ever since then, in one way or another. And they're always different. There is a lust for life in his work. There is a drive. There's an urgency that just makes you just want to do something that you've never done before. And when somebody pulls that out of you, it's just a great feeling inside. So I love him dearly as a great friend, and I admire his outrageous attitude of doing something for the art of filmmaking that not many people have ever done before. So I just, every time out of the box, I think, where are we going this time? Yeah. That's
Let's
awesome.
cause some trouble. Because in his movies, I don't know whether you've ever noticed this or not, but everybody's wrong. Everybody's doing something wrong. Go down the list. You'll see what I mean. Yeah. And to make this in the movies that we just love and blow our mind, wow, what an artist.
Yeah. So here's another one. You're Canadian. What inspired you to write The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down about the American Civil War from a Southerner's perspective?
Well, yeah, it was something that we touched on before, of when I came from Canada and went to the South, it did something to me that people there took for granted. To me, I came in and the whole thing, and in Canada, they don't teach that in school. They don't teach United States history. They teach Canadian history, right? As you would. So for me, it was all fresh and new, and I came into it with these innocent eyes, and it blew over me, and it made such an impact on me that I carried this around inside of me. And there was a time, too, when I was with Levon, and too, I wanted to write a song that Levon could sing better than anybody in the world. But there was a point when he took me, and I was visiting with his folks, and his dad, who was like real serious Southern Mississippi Delta cotton farmer guy. And he's telling me about the way things work down there. Some of it from a Canadian point of view, I'm thinking, whoa, really? Oh, is that okay? Mm-hmm. And then in his story and everything, which is kind of giving me chills a little bit, he says, but don't worry, Robbie, the South is going to rise again. I thought, whoa. So all of this stuff inside, it came out years later, and it was all of these little pieces, they add up somehow, And because I was so impressionable, a Canadian had to write the night they drove Dixie down.
Did you go to church there at all? Like there are so many of those songs are either hymn-like or derived from the harmony of hymns and songs you hear in church, gospel.
Oh yeah, no, hymns are, incredibly influential in music, and back as far as we can remember.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, another question, another whole era. I believe that Storyville is some of your best work. Tell us what you think of that recording. That's 91, second solo record, right?
Yeah. I had always, there was something about New Orleans there was more music per square inch there than anywhere else in the world. And so many different kinds and amazing musics. And it's its own planet. We know it's part of the United States, but they have their own food, their own music, their own dances. And then once you just go outside of town to Lafayette, Louisiana, they've got Zydeco music, Cajun music. It's like, I don't know anywhere else where there is such a particular culture and sound and flavor and everything. So I've always been intrigued by this place. And then, it came time for me to make a record, and I was thinking, how can I have as much fun as I possibly can making music? Oh, I know. Let's go do this in New Orleans. And let's work with the Nevilles, and let's work with, the Wild Chapatulas people, and all of this, and once again, mixing up a new gumbo. So it was really an indulgence on my part just to have a really good time.
Yeah. And that was when Daniel Lanois had his studio there, right?
Yep.
That was recorded.
Yep.
Yeah. So back to the Last Waltz. Sorry, I'm trying to keep moving because we have a lot of these. What was the inspiration for including Neil Diamond in the Last Waltz?
Well, there was, just talking about New Orleans, in the musicalities that came together for doing this celebration of music, we said, okay, we got Dr. John the Night Tripper.
Yeah.
He can represent New Orleans. We got Muddy Waters, who can represent Chicago blues as good as anybody who's ever walked the earth. We've got Eric Clapton from the British blues coming in. We got the Canadians. We got Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, representing part of our background. And what else do we need? Oh, who's going to represent Tin Pan Alley? We thought about Carole King would be really cool. We had great appreciation. And Neil Diamond and I had worked together. People told me, he'd ask me to produce a record of his, and everybody said, you can't do that. You can't produce a Neil Diamond record. And the more they said it, the more I thought, oh, really? Yeah. And so I did. And our connection on this record was that we had a crossroads from the Brill Building in New York, where all these songwriters, and it was for us at one time, for Neil Diamond, all he wanted to be was a songwriter in the Brill Building in the tradition of Tin Pan Alley. I admired these songwriters and met them when I was really young so much. So he represented the Tin Pan Alley part of it. And then we said, okay, then we'll get the staple singers to represent gospel music. And we'll get Emmylou Harris. I've written a Cajun song. And Emmylou Harris we can represent country music. So all of these spokes in the wheel that came together, they were all one as legitimate as the other.
Yeah, that's awesome. And in fact, that's right. Even Neil Diamond rises there.
Oh yeah, it's very emotional. Yeah. And he did a song that we wrote together, And it was, in remembrance of Martin Luther King Jr. So, I don't know, there was nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No. Okay, this is a music geek question. You often seem to strive for Hubert Sumlin, Willie Johnson from Howlin' Wolf's band sound. Is there a song where you think you captured that?
Yes. I think I first captured it playing with Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks on Who Do You Love? I played some guitar solos on that were directly influenced by those guys. And how could you not be influenced by a song called I Asked for Water and She Brought Me Gasoline?
Yeah, that's right. This one says, please, Robbie, what is Van Morrison really like? Honest.
You don't want to know.
That's awesome. And this one I think we know. Who screamed out, play it fucking loud? Excuse my language. That night. Huh?
I don't know. They say that Bob yelled that out. I don't know. And any of us. I mean, we were in such anguish with what was going on, with people booing us and throwing stuff at us. And like I said, this rebellion about, just feeling bold about the music. It was part of that saying, oh yeah? And pushing back against this rebelling against the rebellion.
Right. I'm really struck by going from that tour and then, being in the basement at Big Pink and working on these songs that have so much nuance in them. And you talk a couple times in the book about playing in an understated way, that you're not going to be always the Muddy Waters sort of,
Oh, the screaming. No,
Yeah.
I'd already done that.
Right.
You
But to go from this tour where everything was really intense to this basement where you had time to do, time and the wherewithal, all the materials, everything you needed to kind of sculpt these very beautiful miniature songs. I wonder if that at any point felt like, wow, we have just shifted gears 180 degrees from where we were 6 months before.
Some different things play into that. One thing is when we made music from Big Pink, it didn't resemble anything we had done with Ronnie Hawkins or Levon and the Hawks or Bob Dylan. It was not trying to do something different, but in the basement, the setup, we're all set up in a circle so we can see one another. And when somebody's improvising, we're right there. We know what's coming next. Bob is always pulling a rabbit out of the hat. So you got to be on your toes, right? And we're sitting in a circle, and if you play too loud, you can't hear the other guy. You're going to miss what's going on, and you can't hear the singing. So you got to play in a balanced way. The way that they played music years ago before amplification. Now we are the electric guys, and now taking that full circle and back to a place of subtleties and delicate things and emotional things. And if this doesn't give you chill bumps, then we didn't do it right. So you're reaching for something else, and it's almost like, just pull back a little bit on that until it just feels so good that you're happy to have left out something completely unnecessary.
Wow, yeah. I wonder if you talk a lot about the balance of musicianship that you discovered in that room. What was it like to write about this so many years later, to think about this moment where this group of people developed this sound that became instantly identifiable and grew in other ways over the course of the evolution of the band? But in that basement, you got essentially this whole wonderful nucleus going. And well, I can't imagine sitting back 40 some years later and sort of reflecting on those characters as you do so beautifully, but also of the sounds, those sonorities. It's like we don't get that kind of sound anymore. And I wonder if it was at all emotional for you to spend time going back into that place.
I don't very often, I don't revisit these things. I'm kind of looking forward. I really like looking forward, and I like the challenge of what's coming next. And is there going to be something? I don't know how to do that, but I got to figure out how to do that. Yeah. That's, what, makes things stir for me. Agreeing to write this book and going back to those places, I found that I could not only remember this stuff, but I could go right there. I could hear it. I could remember what people were wearing in the room. I had those feelings. I have some kind of a memory thing, and it allowed me to write a book like this. I'm not writing this book from now saying, why I remember back then when we did this. I'm in it when I'm writing this. It is what is happening next. And this constant discovery and searching process that really made my blood boil, made me just so excited about what was coming next. So that's one of the differences in this, because I know from some people I know, and people that have written autobiographies, or other people have written them, and they talk into a tape recorder. I wrote this longhand,
wow.
every word of this, and because
I didn't use one of the big pink typewriters. They must still be.
I tried typing, I tried other things, and the rhythm of writing it longhand just did something, and it allowed my memory to do its process. And so in writing about this, I was in that basement.
Wow. Well, we've been given the time's up signal. Please help me thank Mr. Robbie Robertson. Thank you for being here.